Okay, so we click through the four components. The horse, obviously. Now we make assumptions that we're talking about an animal that is healthy with his feet, teeth, body, mind. He's not sore. He's balanced and he's emotionally safe and connected to you, the rider. The rider, of course, kind of the same list, really, needs to be healthy, comfortable in your seat, balanced with good posture, capable of self-carriage, and emotionally secure and connected to the horse. The saddle. Okay. For us, the saddle means this piece of equipment should encourage healthy, natural movement, not be restrictive. The underside of it should be shaped generously, we've learned. Welcome a horse's uplifting and expanding body, not shaped to fit the standing body when the back is down and the spine muscles and whatnot slope off. A saddle must have an internal skeleton of significant substance. Treeless saddles. We thought maybe like most people who take a look at treeless saddles, it sounds like a good idea, doesn't it, to leave your horse free of obstruction. But what we've learned is without the internal skeleton having some strength to stabilize the rider, after about 15 minutes, a horse is going to begin to drop away to varying degrees and travel less and less healthily over time. So they're not a good idea. You need a skeleton, but it needs to be shaped properly. And of course, it should balance the rider as securely as and as comfortably as possible. You want the rider biomechanics cannot be efficient if the rider isn't happy with the top side of the saddle. So we take care of the horse first, and it took us many years to do that, many prototypes, just watching horses. We had to tune the humans out sometime. I'm blathering on, aren't I, Ryan? We need to move on. No, my audience is saying no, but I tend to go down these. I am so driven to make sure you get simple information that's going to help you that I don't want to be too redundant. Okay, the fourth component, which we won't be discussing much today, is the interface. And this is the most under-recognized important feature of riding dynamics. There are so many people who think if they have to monkey with what's between the horse's body and the underside of the saddle using shims or anything that has some customizing dimension, they're thinking, oh, there must be something wrong with the saddle. And they really don't get the importance of it. What we've learned is no saddle, no custom-made saddle, no off-the-rack saddle, no saddle can possibly refrain from restricting horses' shoulders because it's going to flop forward if you don't use an interface and know what you're doing with it. And we can show you the simple formula for that. Okay, what's next? It's very important that you understand how to tell if your horse is struggling due to an ill-fitting saddle. And there are some simple things you can notice. There's a whole long list that starts with when you get him from the pasture, is he resistant to you? Or certainly when you're carrying a saddle toward your horse, you can tell the signs. But if you cultivate your eye to notice some of, we're just going to list 5 simple things that can generally show you if a horse is stressed. Can you see in that picture how stressed that horse is? Can you see he's diving on the forehand? He just looks tense and stressed, right? Right? Okay. Can you see that is the same horse, literally less than a full trip around the arena later after we changed equipment. Doing these before and after demonstrations with horses is such an emotional experience every time. I did get teary with this guy because when I first saw, I knew that this gal had ridden that horse eventing for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles in that saddle that was causing that contortion. So let's go next to show you simple things about that contorted way of going. If the head is held high and it nods up during walk, transitions, or stops, just walking along, if the head is bouncing up, that's pretty much a guarantee that the saddle is restricted behind the shoulders, on the shoulders, at the very least. The head and neck look shorter than the length of the body when a horse is tense. You can feel it yourself. If you had a book in your backpack, you kind of shrink away from it and can shorten your top line, right? And just avoid that discomfort, which creates problems in the rest of your body. None of the biomechanics in a horse are going to work well if the shoulders are restricted. Short, choppy strides, tense, skinny neck, stiff, and he just looks like he's working hard. Change equipment, give him some room. The head nods down. You can feel it yourself. If you nod your head down, you feel your top line stretching. It relieves the stress in the shoulders. Your top line is stretched. Your head and neck look, in the case of a horse, the same length as the body. And longer rhythmic strides, softer, deeper neck, no bulge in the underneck. And overall, it just looks more effortless. It's less work. Okay, that's how to recognize what we're talking about. These slides are going to live in this presentation, and you can pause them to read some of this stuff. I don't want to be redundant. We pursued a quest to develop these saddles to fit the horse in motion, starting in 2001 when we founded our company. And we succeeded several years later in earning the horse's approval. It took a little bit longer to get rider approval, especially on the English side, and I'll tell you a bit more about that because we have finally cracked the code for English riders who need to be nice and tight and narrow in there. This is an interesting graphic that I put together for you to thank you, Wendy, of Inky Mouse Studios. I found her illustrations online, but this illustrates the top line of a standing horse on top. You can see it has that gentle curve behind the wither, and saddle makers often build a saddle thinking fitting that would feel comfortable to the horse. What we know is when a horse powers up underneath the rider, it engages, lifts to flat, if possible, from croup to wither. The withers become higher so that the forehand has less weight on it. And that is what and it gets wider. If you were to take a picture of here's an example of an Andalusian standing there with that lovely gentle curve that many saddle makers might think is delightful to fit. We know that when the rider is going to ask him to power up and do collected maneuvers, he needs to be almost a straight line from his croup to wither, and he is broader. If you had a camera from up above, he is wider. Okay. He cannot be comfortable if the saddle gets in the way of that. One more of these sorts of slides, because this is a phenomenon we see over and over again, and it's fascinating. This is an example where I myself was asked to help a gal fit her off the track thoroughbred. You can see the saddle damage on that horse's back. Do I have to point out? You can see a horse's body will tell you what he can and cannot use when ridden, when you take the saddle off. So this horse hadn't been even ridden that day, but you can see that he must struggle. He looks unhealthy almost. By putting the saddle on him, this second photograph was taken just a couple of minutes later. Well, however long it took me to saddle the horse, but it's a generous saddle with shims in the right place. The rider swung on board, and that horse struck that posture instantly. It's hard to believe it, I can promise you. And I might even be able to coach you on video to do it with your own horse if you've got a horse you're concerned about. The saddle, being generous underneath, will enable him to lift and spread, and he's engaging muscles just standing there. That's just posture. He looks like a quarter horse, doesn't he? I happen to know that horse looks like a giant warm blood by now because she has gone on to get riding education and continue to use our saddles. I need to get an up-to-date picture of them because you wouldn't believe it. No one's going to believe it anyway. They probably think I photoshopped that. I didn't. Aha. Julissa. We knew Julissa was coming. Thank you, dear. Julissa brought her adorable little rocket ship barrel horse over one day and was curious to try our saddle. And I said, let me see you go in your saddle. And I think you can see it's not as bad as the original before and after we showed you a few slides ago, but you can see that horse is tense. The neck looks skinny, the head and neck look a little bit short. And Julissa said he was kind of choppy to ride around, right? So all we did is change equipment, and that was one time around the arena, and you can see the difference. The horse was able to power up under her, spread and lengthen, and just look at the expression on the face. Anyway, that's very typical. Makes me cry most times. Anyway, This is another slide. I just wanted to show you that the four components, including the horse and the rider, the saddle, and the interface. The horse on the left is ridden regularly by an excellent rider who did not use our equipment. And you can see the damage to his body. It makes me cringe to see a hole behind the scapula like that and an overdeveloped muscle on the front of the scapula. And it's quite common to see that, isn't it, out there? The horse on the right is a dressage horse ridden regularly in our equipment. Both of the riders are excellent. What's missing is the equipment. Okay, Saddlery foundation. I've mentioned that it's very, very important to have a foundation. Most saddle trees are wooden, either covered with fiberglass or rawhide is traditional. And you've got a fork or a pommel, and you've got a candle with varying degrees of dish in it. The dish is the butt cupping part. And our ranch saddles, any ranch saddle is going to have a dishier candle than another kind of recreation saddle. We make quite a variety of saddles using not wood for the bars and ground seat because we discovered this incredible elastomer compound. See how thin it is. Instead of being a thick plank of wood here, this is very thin. It took us years to find the shape in wood that horses approved of. And once we got that shape, then we could build molds to pour this compound in and get a feature that is just unparalleled. You may have heard about flexible trees out there. This is the most incredible flexible tree on the market, not just because of the compound, not just because of all the other things we do on top for whatever style riding you want to do, but because of our shape. The horses told us was the right thing to do. I just want to show you that a flexible tree is an exciting thing to ride for you because it flexes, our flexible tree, it flexes just enough. Can you see that? Does the camera pick that up? So you can feel that you would be in harmony with your horse's movement and he in turn with you. It's in addition to the fact that it's very thin and you're very close to the horse, but it doesn't collapse and cave in. And the ground seat is formed in there. So instead of having two bars, which is typical of Western trees, and the saddle maker has to build a ground seat and fill in here, and consistency in doing that is a little harder to achieve. Plus, this is just a wonderful thing. The stirrup bar slot is the same. We make two different lengths of bars and two different widths because our standard wide saddle is actually 10 degrees wider than what is known as full quarter horse bars. And I prepared a slide somewhere. I downloaded some pictures. There we go. People often ask us, what's a semi-quarter horse bar? What's a full quarter horse bar? And essentially, it's around 90 degrees or a little more than 90 degrees in rafter angle. But we've learned that horses don't approve of that. They really do travel more comfortably in our saddles, which are 10 degrees wider than this, and then are super wide for the big coffee table backed horses, whether they be Icelandics or Clydesdales. The flat back, broad chested, wide horses love our super wide, which is about 20 degrees wider than full quarter horse bars. Okay, so I've kind of covered this to a degree. If the angles of the saddle, when you're looking at it from the front, mirror your standing horse, you can guarantee when your horse starts to move, he has nowhere to go. If there's rock in the center, if it's narrow, rafter angle on the bars from the front. So what we prefer to do is to provide a U-shaped structure that hugs your horse and it settles down on them and you feel in them instead of perched on top like I always say like a birdhouse roof on a beach ball. When you're up there and in a saddle that's pinching your horse, he's traveling rougher, it's tippier, a whole lot of things. And that's Western or English. The concept is the same. We can make diagrams for all of our saddle models for you, and we have some running on our website, but basically the saddle parts are pretty much similar across the board down through history. There are some things that we do that are consistent for our saddles because we've discovered they're the best way to do things. One is we have a latigo on each side, left and right, to secure the main cinch. Because that way you can adjust your main cinch so that the center D, I should have a cinch handy, I guess. The center is the center. Oh, Jaleesa's got one. So this is in the center of your horse's chest, not over here. And the rear cinch will hook to the rear D, and the cinch hobble between the rear cinch and the main cinch. In our case, we always make a short one so that the rear cinch can angle forward, and the pressure in the center of your horse is in the sternum region. Horses do not mind that. It's not something to grapple on his soft belly and make him uncomfortable or feel frightened. So short cinch hobble, collect to the center ring, take a little extra care when you get accustomed to our system with the latigos on both sides because you can adjust them evenly. And I always say you don't want your horse to feel like his bra's on crooked. It just doesn't feel good. Yeah. Okay, what else do we have that's typical to us? We always have a twist and wrap stirrup. We take care, our saddle makers take care to make sure that the bottom part of your fender area is twisted and curled and attaches to the Blevins buckle, so the Blevins slide is flat against your horse's side, but your stirrup is ready for your foot. So you don't have to fish around or torque your hips and knees to find your stirrup. Very often you'll find stirrups that are flat. Barrel racers have stirrups like that, don't they? Yes. And as long as your leather is really broken in, maybe it's soft enough, but this is handier. And these are beautiful stirrups, aren't they? We're very pleased with these. We have these laminated hardwood stirrups, handcrafted in Germany, and they're just a beautiful piece of work. Many layers of hardwood. All of the specs for each of our models, and we have 20-some Western models and half a dozen English models. Can't wait to tell you about our English models because we've really just, we haven't even announced it yet. We have finally cracked the code, as I told you, to keep the rider comfortable. We've been able to take care of the horse for years, but we've struggled with English for those people who just really wanted a close leg drape. I forgot to tell you that the bars of these molds are in two lengths. So they're 22 inches for our smaller seat sizes and 23 inches for our 17 and 17 and a half. We can make standard and super wide in sizes ranging from 15 to 17 and a half, sometimes 18 in certain styles. The sizing of the saddles, this is something important that we've learned and that we want to share. Many people worry about their seat size and how to determine what it is. Who's coming? Hi there. Welcome. Hi. That's not a problem. Glad to have you. Many people are accustomed to the traditional way of measuring a Western seat, for instance, from the back of the fork or the bottom of the base of the horn to either the top of the cantle or the back of the seat. That's okay, but there's going to be a variation that's predictable by such things as, do you have a saddle style where the fork rocks forward a little bit, or do you have a fork straight up or leaning back? Do you have a more straight up cantle? That's not a reliable way of measuring. We measure seat size to accommodate your hip and leg angle. It's called the leg channel. And the leg channel is determined by the distance between the base of the raw tree and the base of the base of the cantle on the raw tree and the base of the fork. So we know, for instance, in our saddles, this is going to make a size 17 saddle because the distance from the base of the cantle to the base of the fork is 11 inches. If it were 11 and a half inches, it's a 17 and a half. With a size 16, that's 10 inches. 16 and a half, 10 and a half inches. And smaller in half-inch increments. But that's so it's always best to test ride one of our saddles. We may not equate to the traditional parlance, but in generally, if we have your height, weight, inseam, and can see a picture of you in a saddle in our free saddle fit evaluation process, we can help guide you. English saddle. Okay. You can all download anywhere a picture of what a tree parts are. This was one of our prototype trees. You can see how wide we went with this one, but this is called a head plate. It's steel, a gullet plate. This is beech wood in a hoop shape. This is a traditional form of construction in England. We have our saddles handcrafted in England by magnificent masters. But anyway, this technology has been around for quite a while. It is also a flexible tree. Can you see that? So you've got flexibility, and we have our standard and our super wide. And what more can I say about that? It's what you do on top of it for the horse. And I mean, on the bottom of it for the horse, we always like really soft panels that crush and conform. In fact, most of our riders never have their saddles reflocked because the flocking is already very soft. And with our custom Versafit system in between the horse's body and the underside of the saddle, be the dreamiest ride you and your horse ever had if you don't make those panels hard again. Okay, we have jump saddles now. We have pro dressage saddles. I am thrilled that we don't have some of the samples I wanted to show some of you because we have some pros trading them around town here in Ocala. The season is starting, and so they're running them back and forth to each other because, as I say, they know we've been able to take care of their horses for years and they've owned our saddles. But now they really are feeling that they've got the leg connection they've dreamed about, and we've dreamed about it. Oh my gosh, what it's taken. Okay, what's next? Oh, I do want to make this point. When you look up saddle fitting information in books or on the internet or watch videos, you will traditionally see and still see traditional thinking is you mirror the angle of the horse's shoulder and you have your saddle fit that. And the saddle makers allow for a little bit of expansion, but in our discoveries, they didn't allow for enough. And if you fit, you can, is that slide on now, Ryan? If you fit the mirrored shoulder, you can just imagine that when that horse lifts the leg and tries to strike forward, that saddle is going to pinch. Our thinking is you make the tree hug, not perch. That's for one thing. So it's wider and shaped differently. And then the panels thin but very soft. And then you have the interface with a shim. In that case, the little orange thing that I did in my drawing is meant to be a shim set back from the front of the saddle because the shoulders are going to bulge underneath the front of the saddle. So you've got the shim in there. So in that little drawing, if I picked up that stick horse's leg, that brown line would fill in that space. And that sounds so simple, doesn't it? But that's what traditional saddles don't do. And traditional saddle fit thinking doesn't accommodate. So and when I'm watching people do those saddle fit demonstrations, and I'm looking at the horse and I'm thinking, the horse is saying, please don't mirror my shoulder. Don't put that pin there along my shoulder and think that that's the way I want my saddle to touch my body, because my body is going to change. This is one of those formulaic things that we've discovered along the way. I always took notes about what worked and what didn't work and tried to distill it down to simple things we can share. We can tell you if you have an Icelandic a warm blood, a Clydesdale, an Arabian, a gaited horse that might have a longer reach of shoulder backswing, whatever. If you want to know how to position your saddle, you need to know where to find the back edge of the bone, the scapular bone. You find the back edge, and this would have cartilage on it, of course. So you should be able to feel this. You might have, if you have a fleshy horse, you might have to poke gently around a little bit till you know you're confident. Where is that scapular bone? For a Western saddle, you make sure that the front 1/3, oh, this isn't a shiny concho. It's hard to see. Here's a shiny concho. The front 1/3 of the concho is where, because Western saddles flare out over the shoulders, English saddles sit behind. But where your fingertips curl over, if you reach under your pad and saddle, that's where that should sit. I don't care, again, if it's a short-backed horse and people think, oh gosh, I'm going to be going beyond the 18th rib with my short-backed horse if I do that. Let me tell you, horses have consistently told us they would rather have you sitting on their hips than too far forward. So that's your rule of thumb, where your fingertips curl over. That will put your cinch about, or your girth, about a hand's breadth behind the elbow of the horse. Okay, so when the saddle is properly fit, which will give those shoulders room to expand, you shouldn't have the trouble of your horse shoulders shoving your saddle back or hunching it forward, which we hear complaints about quite often. So you should develop a rhythm together where you can hold that saddle so that the girth doesn't crawl up in his armpit. Make sense? For an English, oh, I didn't cover the English saddle, did I? The Western saddle, that's where your fingertips curl under the saddle at the front of the concha. With an English saddle, if it's a monoflap, your fingertips would curl over right in front of the saddle, or up to two. You can have your saddle set up to 2 fingers behind that, but find that scapula bone and position it there. If you have a forward flap saddle, I won't take time to get our jump saddle. A forward flap saddle has points of the tree that you can find under the leather flaps, and make sure those points are just behind where your fingers curl over. Okay, that's it. It's never fail. Traditional is they measure from the back of the wither to the 18th rib. Somehow the 18th rib got to be so sacrosanct in people's minds that they avoid putting any part of their saddle behind that point. And as I said, horses have consistently indicated that it's more important to avoid any oppression on the shoulder, and a little bit of saddle extended beyond the 18th rib is no problem. All right, our basic concept: from the moment a horse takes the first step, the body becomes a totally different set of dynamic shapes. You need to have your saddle and the interface be able to accommodate that, or you can't have a happy partner. It's that simple. Okay, that's an illustration I found on the web. I need to find the credit for that, but it's a beautiful drawing. But you can see that the tree is on top of the shoulder blade, and it looks like that horse is standing still. So that would mean that tree is way too far forward. It should be behind that scapula bone. And then it should be lifted off the bulge of muscle that's going to happen another 5 or 6 inches behind that with a tapered foam shim. Okay, I think we've covered this. If the saddle has rock, it's going to press down in the center of the horse's back. There's no point in making a saddle to fit a sagging back. Better you adjust with the pad and shim system so the horse can carry himself properly and get back to better posture. No matter what his age, we can show you how to fit your horse with our fitting system so that he can posture himself to carry you comfortably. So, does anybody believe that that isn't the truth? Okay, what's next, Ryan? All right, we do have free saddle fit evaluations. I mentioned that on our website. And personal fit coaching, our team is as passionate about offering it as I am. And I think you'll be amazed at the quality of service and the volume of information you'll get for your personal situation. Take a test ride. Nothing I can say is going to convert to your brain like what you'll feel when you test ride our equipment and it's set up properly and you feel your horse able to move like never before. Okay, am I open for questions? There's I have no idea what your questions might be, so please ask them. We've got all sorts of different models. The specs are on our website, volume of specs, the weight, the purpose, the construction, the whatever, but what questions? Yes, ma'am.
We have a new horse with a huge asymmetry in the shoulders.
Yes.
The right shoulder is much larger than the left.
That happens because he's got hypertrophy in one area, right? This is a body worker and an energy biomechanicist here, Jaleesa. Yes, the horse has been traveling crooked. You may have unbeknownst to yourself, if you've had the horse for a long time, you may have contributed to that. I know I have. No, just got him. All right. So he probably needs, this is beyond the purview of our discussion here. He needs a saddle that's going to welcome his ability to get himself organized again. He needs online training. He needs a number of things that are part of the 4 components, but it can be fixed. How old is he? 10. Plenty of time. Plenty of time. He needs to travel properly and not ever be restricted again that caused that unnatural way of going. Right? Anybody disagree? Yeah.
The nice thing about their set of shims is you could maybe use a thicker one on the shoulder that's atrophied and then a thinner one on the shoulder that isn't. So
when you ride him with what we had, he just
You get the
decided.
roll.
Saddle will fall to the weak side, to the side.
He picks up his foot and
Yeah.
the muscle, the bone comes up and it just knocks
Yeah.
it off. So
Yeah. Well, our interface system and a saddle will make a huge difference.
Only if you want to, how you might send a pad or.
Well, are we getting beyond the purview of the saddle discussion? All right, I don't have a pad here, do I? Give me a pad. If you have, now our pads have this incredible, we have a couple of different kinds of pads. This is one. If you stand on that with your shoes on, did you feel it? It's this starts out 3/4 of an inch thick and it goes down to nothing. So it's comfortably conforming to your horse's body. But while it's doing that, you need to, I'll just use this simple one. You need to have a shim inside your pad that's a tapered foam shim where the lifting power of it is at his scapula backswing point. We explain all of that on. You need to lift his front leg. See where's that bulge of muscle behind there to keep pressure off of that area. I'm putting this because this is a skinny pony, and if anybody wants to sit on this in one of our generous saddles, see, this is the room for the pony to grow. What was I going to say? Here, can you see this? The 4 B's for saddle fit. You know where the bone is. You know where the bulge is when you're going to lift your horse's leg and feel where's that muscle. When this scapula bone swings back, it's big muscles on the top side and the underside. So he can set himself wider as he travels and power up under you. Okay? Where that bulge is, just behind that bulge, you put the lifting power of a shim. It may be a thin one, it may be a thick one. If you do our saddle fit evaluation, we can tell you, give you a recommendation. We usually send the full set of shims with you for your test ride, your pad, your saddle, and the coaching that you need. If you need virtual coaching, we can see everything through the lens of a camera. If you have someone to hold your camera and you have your horse, your saddle, your pads, your shims, we can help you saddle up, and then we can watch you test ride.
the pad is not on the bump, it's just shy of it. So that when he raises up, he's not.
Yeah, you want it behind. You've probably got a bump on the front part of this scapula, right? Whereas you've got a hollow behind here, do you?
The chiropractor said that he probably injured the good side, the normal side, and the huge side is Compensate.
compensating. So he may never, if the, depending upon the extent of the injury, he may never be level and you may forever need a thin shim on one side and a thick on the other or something. We can help you sort that out. Ideally, if you're able to exercise your horse online and getting back to good posture and then follow up with good saddling, he should be able to recover to normal conformation. But if he's damaged, you must know, it's your responsibility to know where is the back edge of your horse's scapula bone. That tells you where to position your saddle. You then need to know when you lift the front leg, the scapula bone is going to swing back. You see this bulge right here? And there's going to be a bulge of muscle there. That's what needs to happen underneath the front of your saddle. But most saddles lock down and don't let that happen. And that's what creates an unhappy horse and a sorrowful way of going and muscle damage and all kinds of other things. So once you find that bulge, then you tuck the lifting power of a tapered foam shim. Here's the thin one. We have thin and thick in 3 different shapes, and these are magical tools. They have just the right, I always say, the right amount of support and squish. You put that lifting power behind that bulge, and then the back part of the shim transitions along your horse's body, so he doesn't even feel it, but it's doing its work right here. And then the 4th B is balance. If you have a horse that's taller in the wither than the croup, and you add the shim, you might tilt the saddle and need to lift it back up a little bit. So you put a tapered foam shim in the rear going the other way to balance it. Or if you have a horse like mine, I have a quarter horse who's lower, they build them, they breed them lower in the front than the back. And so if I'm going to get my weight off his front end, I might need a couple of shims, but the one shim goes behind the bulge of that muscle. That's the most important shim. And then after that, we can help you tweak perfection for rider balance. So, you know where the bone is, that tells you where to put your saddle. You know where the bulge is, that tells you where to put the shim behind it. And then you know, stand back and look or get up and feel. Do you need to adjust for balance? Make sense? 4 Bs. Okay, 4 components of riding success. The saddle. Any questions about saddles? Some questions online? What are they?
From Mary Jo, she says, we haven't talked about mules. Does the same apply for mules?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have quite a number of mules going, and we have some, I think, testimonials on YouTube and whatnot from mule owners. This thing works so well for them too, whether they be slab-sided or flat-backed. Very often mules are straight across the top, but this system works beautifully. You need the interface. You need at least one shim. Usually with the mule, I find that this long double tapered shim works well for some reason. This tapers from this point to nothing and from this point to nothing. And if you put this taper point at the scapula backswing point behind the bulge, this length seems to stabilize it. And anyway, this has been my favorite mule shim.
Nicole asks, how can I measure or identify if my horse needs a wide or super wide saddle?
That's a good question. And I wondered that myself during the course of measuring so many horses. After we had our standard saddle established, and I started looking at the wider horses and how comfortable they were compared to their old saddles, I thought, I bet we can do even better for them. So started measuring horses everywhere I went. And on our website, you'll see a free saddle fit evaluation, and it's a little formula. Is there a flexi curve around here?
It's on
On the floor. It's a little formula that I came up with just because I kept notes on which horses really, really loved the super wide more than the other. And I found that if you measure with a flexi curve your horse right behind the scapula, where your fingertips curl over, measure there, and then take that and trace it on a piece of paper, okay? And then measure behind where the bulge is and trace that on a piece of paper, and then measure where you sit on your horse's body. Just stroke it down. I think we have instructions running on our, don't we? Okay, so measure where you sit. And then I kept all those measurements and tracings, and I thought, what's the common denominator? It sounds so silly, but I found, all right, everybody has a legal pad around somewhere, don't they? I mean, a legal pad is 14 inches. So if I took 14 inches and found where does 14 inches intersect my drawing and how far down from the top is that, I came up with a formula. If your horse is really flat where you sit, then that's going to be a shallow number, right? And so I've got the numbers. I think it was 2 3/8. If your horse is 2 3/8 or less in this dimension, I don't care if he's already lost muscle up in his shoulder, he's going to love a super wide. These will grow. But these tell us how much work is there to be done and what shims would we recommend while he's repairing and regrowing that muscle if you have a super wide. So it's a kind of an, doesn't sound very scientific or specific, but it works like gangbusters. Okay? All right, so the question is, she has the same size natural performer, which is our natural performer is the first saddle we ever made. It's still the same tree. We have never waffled from the way we construct it. The natural performer is like this. It has suede covered memory, suede covered memory foam on the bottom. Okay, so this is a wonderful, wonderful substance. But leather is a little more stable than the skirts that we use on our lightweight. So it could mean that there was that kind of difference. The tree, the skeleton is the same. The amount of room for the horse is the same. It just must be a matter of the substance difference, perhaps. This is a lightweight version of the same saddle as this. And you'll see the underside. Did you get a camera shot of the underside of this? Okay, so the underside of this is, I'm hooked on my horse here. All right, the underside of the, what? Underside of this is on the same shaped tree, but this felt substance, it doesn't have the memory foam of the same thickness. It's just a little different. It's a little different. And being lighter weight, I imagine the purchase on the horse may not be quite the same. I don't know. I wish I were with you. I'm gonna compare the two. So that's the beauty of the Versafit system, isn't it? You can either trade pads or shift shims a little bit, but you can be confident whatever saddle you get from us, you're taking care of your horse. The skeleton and the substance is the same. You can hug your horse. Okay, what else?
Ida Norris is asking, can I use my Versafit air pad that I'm using with my Contour Western saddle under my English saddle?
Ida, boy, I love hearing from you. I know Ida is a writer and a judge in the Western dressage world of some respected renown. So I'm thrilled that you're curious about our system, Ida, and I look forward to working with you. The English tree is shorter, and you'll have a little more pad out the front and the back from a Western saddle because your Western saddle tree bars are 22 inches. And so the substance of your English seat is going to be shorter. And so you'll probably have a little bubbly thing. It'll look a little funny. But our English pads, our English half pad is something I would recommend to you. And we have an air pad half pad that's 23 inches, do I remember? 21 inches? I should have that in my head. But anyway, all right, this is, yeah, she has an air pad. And those air cells are wonderful. Have you got a half pad air pad? Yeah, so you can see This saddle has the same tree length as the saddle you have, so the English is shorter than that. And here's the half pad air pad. And it's wonderful. You just put it on top of your quilted blanket for show or whatever. This doesn't go directly on your horse the way your air pad for your Western saddle does. And with your air pad directly on your horse, you can put a colorful thin Navajo blanket or something on for your Western dressage shows. I'm sure that's what you want to do. And you can try it, but I think it won't be as effective because it's going to let too much air through the baffles of the foam out the front and the back, I think. That would be my thought.
Nicole is asking, when would you suggest using the air style pad over the foam pad?
Well, that's a matter of personal preference for a few reasons. The reason I wanted to develop the smart pad after our tremendous success with the air pad was that some people just didn't want to deal with the technology of these air cells and wondering if they had it right. So they just were put off by it. And I thought, well, we still need to take care of the horse. And I know the interface is important. So let's do something a little easier. And so I found this magnificent foam. It's not just any old memory foam. It is, we have a piece of it here. I had everyone stand on it. You can feel the relief through your boots of this foam, which crushes to nothing but conforms around your horse as it's doing it. Plus the shim sinks into the foam on top, just as it does with the air cell, which mitigates any direct pressure of the edge of the shim, but the shim squishes, so that's not a real issue. But people who are high-level riders, and Ida is certainly one, find that the air cell is a little more immediately responsive as you're moving, and so they like it better. But some of our top riders ride in these as well, or the larger pads. This foam is an auto-adjusting, autodynamic substance, but it's a slower response. So does that help you? The air cell also, both of them are good for asymmetry, but the air cell seems to be maybe just a touch better. I don't think there's a finer pad on the planet than our air pad. And the close second is our smart pad.
Our next question is from one. It says, I have a super wide natural performer that fits my large quarter horse gelding very well. I have another quarter horse gelding that's slightly smaller. I would like to use this saddle on both while I look for another natural horseman saddle with a standard width tree. I've tried a variety of shimming configurations with the smart pad, but I cannot keep the saddle from shifting forward after a few strides. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Have you done a free saddle fit evaluation with us? Because I cannot answer that question. Did everyone hear that? She has a couple of super wide saddles of ours that are shifting forward on a narrower horse. She's looking for one of our standard wide saddles and wondered if she can get along with her saddle while she waits. I would say do a free saddle fit evaluation so that we can take a look at your horse, see the dimensions, see what we need to see to make a recommendation about where to put your shims to stop that from happening to the best we can. And I imagine we can, unless you're talking about a toothpick horse. Horses love super wides, unless then the natural performer has a low fork. So because it doesn't have much distance between the wither and its underside. If you've got a really skinny horse with a high wither, you may have trouble. Our other models have a higher wither clearance. That's why I started designing them. Our natural performer is a magnificent tool, and we've sold thousands of them. But I realized there are some horses that just, particularly while they're recovering their muscle, they need a higher wither clearance. Does that answer?
Thank you. The next question is from Sue, and she says, on your Western saddles, what hardware do you use to connect different saddle components? Is it staples, screws, or glues?
On the different
On the components, how is it configured? Is it with staples, screw, or glue?
All of that, depending upon they're in various stages of the saddle production. Um, Process, we use, you'll see on the underside of the tree itself, in order to attach the wooden forks and handles to the elastomer. It's the base angles of each of these that are really, really important to us, and we want that to be very, very secure. And we drill in and screw into the wood. So there's that. And we use screws in various other places during the saddle process. There may be some staples in some situations, but nowhere where it should be a situation where if the flexible material flexed, the staples would pull out. We use staples in the English saddle process more. I can't think of a staple in a Western saddle, but I don't want to say that they don't. In certain certain styles may have to use some somewhere. Probably not. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Mary's asking if you have a custom saddle that's custom made to your horse, do you still suggest the use of shim?
Without question. That is something that horses have absolutely proven to us. A custom-made saddle sounds like a great idea. I know that's how I got into this, because I had a very expensive one made for my horse, and I could not believe when I watched him that he really couldn't travel as well as he did in the pasture, and I wasn't even in there. Once I saw that, I got a fire in the belly that's still with me now. And I learned as we kept testing all this stuff, a custom-made saddle is still going to fall forward on your horse. When you have it, if you're talking about an English, did you say English saddle? Yes, English saddle. A good saddle flocker will put a puff of flocking at the scapular backswing point, because they know the importance of that. But that squashes and flattens quite soon, so you have to have it reflocked very regularly. As I've told you, our riders don't have their saddles reflocked because they know they don't need it. They know with the consistency of our tapered foam shims, we can have that just the right lift off that shoulder pressure that we need. And the flocking isn't going to help for very long. And the custom-made thing for your horse's shape isn't good enough if you don't lift pressure off those shoulders. It just isn't.
Question is from Julian. She's asking, do you work out of the UK?
Do we work out of the UK? We travel to and from because our master saddlers are in the UK, and we have quite a number of saddles in service in the UK, and we have a number of instructors whom we respect very highly, who could probably help you get familiar with our system if we can't long distance. But I just did yet another virtual saddle fit for a very talented rider in the UK the other day. We can help you fit your saddle from here. I can see everything through that lens, and yeah, we can do it. Unfortunately, shipping a test ride saddle is just not very handy. You might consider ordering and purchasing one, and perhaps, I mean, there's nothing that's going to go wrong for you, but if perhaps you didn't, for some reason, want it, you wouldn't have any trouble selling it.
Next question is from Pansy Erdman, and she's asking, how can we help our friends that are used to traditional saddle fitting methods to look at saddle fit differently without making them defensive?
That is a good question. I'm still trying. I'm hoping that is, if there was ever an opportunity for them to acknowledge some of the basic indicators that their horse might not be comfortable. I mean, first of all, they have to care about their horse's opinion. And they have to be the sort of personality. Hello, John. They have to be the sort of personality that is curious and willing to learn. Learning isn't something that some people want to do. And that's the tragedy of it. So If you could stay curious and at the right moment ask a question, oh, about why is your horse's head nodding up? I often will reach under the front of a horse's saddle and pad if a rider will give me permission and say, wow, that feels a little tight. You know, you can relieve that pressure. If you have any interest in experimenting with tucking a little tapered foam shim on top of your pad under your saddle, back where science has now proven it will really help your horse. Are you interested in the difference in the feel? So if you've got a curious person, hopefully, maybe they'll get that curious. If they do that. The other day, I ambushed him. He didn't know I was coming. Craig Cameron and his son Cole were giving a clinic here in Ocala, or just south of Ocala, and I showed up, and he knew of me because Ty Murray had been apparently flagging him to get in touch with us, which was cool. But he was on a borrowed horse, and I could see with the horse walking down to he was going to start his class for the first morning, and I could see that. And I said, Craig, because I knew he respected me enough because he seemed excited to see me there because of what Ty had said. But I said, Craig, I think that saddle's awfully tight. He said, yeah, I've been thinking it's really tight on his shoulders. I said, you want to try something so simple you won't believe it? Just if you'll hop off, we'll loosen the cinch, we'll tuck the shim back there at the scapula backstring point. I just used a little thin one, and I explained about the shim, and he said, oh my gosh, does that make sense? Then he swung back up in the saddle, and the horse started walking, and the stride was so different. Now, here, horse is an excellent horseman. He said, my God. He said, I can't believe this. I cannot believe the difference. And he actually walked down on the first day of class, walked into the arena and said to everybody before he even started the class, Letitia just put some shims under my saddle, and I can't believe the feeling. If you all want to feel something terrific, go see her. I thought that was pretty. I don't know if I'm helping you, Nancy. Somebody's got to be curious. If you can, one of my dreams is that the judge in an arena for whatever sport, Western or English, is going to be at the mouth of the arena as you walk in, is going to try to reach under the saddle. And if he or she can't get her hand in there, she'll say, you're welcome in the arena to compete after you go back and fix that. All it takes is a shim. It is criminal what we see out there with horses trying to do what the riders are asking in the name of a ribbon or a trail ride. Oh, I'm on my soapbox.
There's a couple more questions online.
Has science proven that this is the best method of
Rigging. That's a very, very good question. There are several places to tie on the main cinch of a Western saddle and of an English saddle. And we discovered by testing and watching the horses, and again, there were many a time where we just had to tune out the traditional opinions we were hearing from the humans and just watch the horses. And we discovered that the overall best position for Western rigging for most sports is essentially the 7/8 position. It's kind of our position because it's kind of quasi right in there with in the 7/8 region. Which is the distance, you can read about it online, the distance from the handle to the front of the saddle and what portion. But that seems to draw well and not cause the saddle to move forward or back more often than any other position. Now, we also know many people, particularly dressage riders and those who want leg communication to be quite sensitive, will often see people take their rear cinches off. We would beg you not to do that because we know the horse needs stability in the back of the saddle. And if you don't want to ride with a cinch because it's in the way of your spur for your maneuvers or something, we like to ride with our cinches we snug it up quite tight before we get up because it will be hanging once the horse powers up, like that brown horse that I showed you, posturing to carry a load. The abdominal muscles will tighten and that rear cinch is going to be hanging loose. It's not in the soft belly region. The pressure is in the sternum region, and it's great, but it's stabilizing the back of the saddle to keep it from swinging across the spine. You can imagine how annoying that would feel. Or if you're on the trail, bouncing up and down. It's just not good to have your saddle anchored by only one fulcrum, essentially. So if you don't want to ride with a rear cinch, rig your latigo starting here from the back. So you would draw it diagonal, take your latigo off, put it here. We have some with a cuff, so you can take it on and off easily, or if you like to ride with nylon, we can get extra long ones if you have we can get extra long nylon ones. A hide is only so long, so if you have a huge horse, you won't be able to get a leather latigo to orient from here very well. But anyway, so you would draw the latigo to your main cinch, go through the buckle, then up and over the rigging D, then down through the buckle again, then up and over the rigging D, and then bring the point of the latigo up to the keeper. Do a little loop for security. But anyway, so you have two wraps around your main cinch. You start it from back here, so you are angled and stable here. Does that make sense? And that works. That's called essentially a center fire rigging, they call it. But I can also say that our English saddles, we will never make a saddle with what's known as a point billet. A point billet brings the, I guess I should do it with the tree. You'll very often see them for riders who just can't hold their saddles steady, will lock the saddle down behind the scapula with a billet that comes off the point of the tree, which is here, you see, these are called, see this? If we were to bring a billet off of this, rather than just behind this, you can imagine how that would lock them down, where we want the shoulders to be able to bulge under here. So we have our billet hanging on. We have one billet that is stationary coming from behind here, and one that sits on a V web, so it can float and stabilize. So you've got a 3-point stability on your horse. I hope I answered the question. Anybody else?
Sylvia is just asking if you could show the underside of the different pads, which they're all the same.
They're all the same. Yeah. We had originally, like everyone else, listened to cowboys when we started this. And cowboys would say, we only want real wool on our horses' bodies. We're not putting anything synthetic on our horse's body. And so we went with that for many years. And with our original smart pads, we wove expensive wool with thermodynamic fibers and trying to do everything we could to relieve heat. And wool simply absorbs sweat and gunk and everything, and you really can't get it out of there. And if you get it out of there, the thing never dries. It's not something, wool is wonderful. But in this day and age, there are all kinds of modern fabrics that are being created that can be put to very good use, we thought, for the animals as well as our own clothing, performance clothing. So I started experimenting with this felt. And then when you think about it, wool kind of swells up. The fibers, when they're hot, they swell up and they collect. The felting process is such that the fibers crawl around together, right? Well, with synthetic fiber, you've got little air pockets between all the fibers that don't swell up and close. So the sweat drains off the horse's body and downward and keeps your horse drier and cooler than real wool. This is synthetic fiber. And this on top, this is we can call it our Smart Pad Breeze. This is a 3D spacer mesh material. You tuck the shims right in here. But this is, all of our pads are breathable. Even the ones with Cordura on top, you can breathe all the way through it, especially this one. When we finish riding, we hose off our pads every time. And you can take a piece of stall matting and scrape the hair off and keep them clean ride after ride after ride. So just hose them down, you'll see the sweat come out of here in foamy. I mean, just to imagine how it collects on a wool pad when you see how much comes out after one ride with a hose.
After you hose, how long does it take to dry?
I just leave it on the fence overnight, and sometimes it rains, and it doesn't matter if it's wet the next day, it's not going to be a problem, but it dries quite quickly. It'll dry even quicker if you want to go to the trouble of taking the foam out, or the air cells are easy to take out, but yeah. So I just leave mine kind of hanging somewhere. And as I say, if it's a little wet, that's not going to bother your horse at all. I mean, there are days when we've had a really humid day and it's still, don't you agree, Lisa? I mean, so what if it's a little wet? It's going to get wet from sweat anyway.
Just compresses quicker.
When it's wet?
Warm 'em up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pam, you have to stand on this if you haven't stood on this foam. Oh, did you? Did you feel that? I mean, it's like you go. So you can just imagine how good that feels to your horse. Any other questions? Gosh, I hope you learned something and I didn't just go over the same old stuff.
The only other thing I think to mention is that there's quite a bit of information online in the library, and they can search on the right-hand corner various things about shimming or
Yes,
different shimming patterns and things like that.
yes, our website has so much information. I worry that it's a little over-facing, but if you poke around in there, you can learn a tremendous amount. And there's a great deal of information about individual saddle models and what is their job. Most of our saddle models are extremely versatile. So you can do most of anything you want to do in the equine sport world. The heavy duty roping saddles are obviously built for that. The lighter models for trail and athletic maneuvers and endurance are built for that. We have barrel saddles, cutting saddles. All of it's basically the same saddle for the horse. It's just what job do you want to do? And if you have any questions about what something might be suited for, we try to prepare charts for here's the saddle you choose if you want to do this. But there's so much cross-reference. I know you were working on one of those charts, Ryan. Did you make progress on what saddles are good for what purpose? Saddle selector? All right, we'll have that up. And as always, hello@contoursaddlery.com if you have any questions that we can answer for you. If there's something we're not explaining very well, tell us, will you? Because sometimes we get so internal looking at it that we don't want to overface or confuse you. We want you to know how simple this stuff is. Now that we've figured it out, we want you to be able to feel really confident that you know where to put your saddle, where to put your shim, no matter what saddle you ride. If you do that, you're going to be ahead of the game. Your horse will be happier. What was the question?
I think the last thing to mention is just, we have our test ride program, but also, for those of you here in Ocala, that we have a place to come ride. You can experiment with the different models. And
yes, we do have, if you're lucky enough to be in Ocala, we do offer that service and would love to have you come test something. If we have to ship one to you, we have to ask you to pay for shipping, but we do that all over the country. We have some saddles in Austria available for test ride. Not many. We're trying to expand the test ride network because that is the way to really believe what we're saying. I wish everyone had the chance to feel what you feel when you ride one of our saddles on your horse for the first time and onward. We have customers who say, I'll never let any of my horses go in anything else again. And so that's where a lot of our business comes from, is repeat from people who have asked their horse's opinion and care about it.
then the last thing I think kind of in closing is this saddle evaluation is for anyone, if you have our saddle pads or not, but it'll help us to guide you in making the right selection for the right model or the right pad or shim and that kind of thing. So even if you're not in the
Right. Even if you're not what?
a current customer yet, or don't have.
Yes.
a shim, but the conversation started.
Yes, if you take advantage of the free saddle fit evaluation, which we would ask you to do if you want to take a test ride, because we want to make certain that we're setting you up for success. And then you are curious enough to take a test ride, we will walk you through the process so that you feel really confident and you get the best opportunity to have an optimum experience. And that is available. That should be obvious online where it is. But hello@contoursaddlery.com for any of your questions. We don't have a large team. We have a small dedicated team, and some of us work 24/7 because this means so much to us. So we would ask your patience maybe for, we can't be Amazon instantly responding to you, but it will be fairly soon that you hear from us if you email with a question. And I hope we've got enough forms online that make it an easy walkthrough process. When ordering a saddle, you can choose all sorts of component parts. And if you need help with that and would like a phone call consult for the process, because it's a big decision, I wish we could make our saddles less expensive than they are. They are really, really fine saddles. You won't find a finer saddle. They take longer to make because we slow our saddle makers down to do things the way we do them, because they're not the traditional way of doing things. We train saddle makers constantly. That's a slow process because with our expanding popularity, we're eager to do that. But it's since COVID, we've begun to pick up speed again. COVID was a disaster for us. There was one point when we had 100 saddles on order and couldn't deliver a one of them. It was the most horrible feeling. But, and we lost a lot of saddle makers during that process. I don't mean to death. I mean, many of them, like many people in the world, changed their mind about what they wanted to do. And the saddle making craft is an old world craft. And unfortunately, there aren't many young people coming up and into it. We hope we can help effect a change in that regard. That's one reason I love being on the board of directors of the Ocala Horse Alliance, and we give Walter Farley's The Black Stallion book to every fourth grade child in this whole region. Because there are 80,000 horses here in Marion County alone, and many of the children don't even have a chance to ever meet one. But I read Walter Farley's The Black Stallion in the third grade, and it gave me the burning desire to have a horse for the rest of my life. I didn't get one until I was 47. How about you? But I've made up for it now because we have done something so significant for horses. I am really very proud. We are, and we're just getting started. We're going to change the world.